Hello again, this is Dr. Greg Parsons, and this is the third in a series of videos, presentations regarding the dissertation process for the DBA program. This presentation is going to deal specifically with the second literature stream and the gap. If you haven't seen the previous two videos regarding the overall process and developing a stream of literature, it's highly recommended that you do so. But before we get started, I'd like to first talk a little bit about what a dissertation is not. Dissertation is not a report on a particular subject. Even though it might be important, even though it might be groundbreaking, it's not a dissertation. A dissertation is something else. It's not an op-ed piece. It doesn't include somebody's opinion about the future of solar energy, or how regulation is ruining the economy, or how the Olympics in Brazil are going to be a disaster. Okay? Again, there's plenty of information on the internet, in newspapers, in magazines that are basically opinion pieces, sometimes by a qualified expert. However, they're just that person's opinion, and they're not subject to the kind of rigor and investigation and scientific methods that a dissertation is. Also, a dissertation is not a personal biography about how you built your business or how you think people should be led most effectively. Okay? And lastly, a dissertation is not simply retesting an established theory. Okay? So, for example, in leadership, transformational leadership is a well-established theory, has been tested and used many times, and it's been correlated quite closely with job satisfaction across the board. So to plan to do a dissertation to measure job satisfaction related to transformational leadership, again, doesn't really say anything. We would expect it to be correlated. It's always been correlated before. So just the fact that you're going to do it with elementary school teachers in Nebraska doesn't mean that you're adding anything to the field. Okay? So those are basically some things that I've seen presented as dissertation topics that I discourage people from trying to follow up on. The right way to consider a dissertation is that it should be the student's best efforts to demonstrate that they are knowledgeable in their particular subject area, whether it be marketing or international business or leadership, that they are able to communicate their ideas in a professional written fashion, which is in general how academics communicate, that they can choose an original approach and show their creativity, both in interpreting and analyzing the existing research, but also in the ability to synthesize existing work into new approaches and suggest new ideas that can then be validated with empirical data. In other words, they're trying to demonstrate that they can indeed produce original research, which is necessary to contribute to the academic journals. And that's basically what the dissertation is supposed to prove, that you can do that. So this should be familiar, but I'll just run through it again quickly. The dissertation process starts out with two streams of literature that become synthesized into a gap and a bridge. That's the green part of the diagram. At that point, what we call the prospectus stage is complete, and when approved, a committee is assigned. Then we move into the proposal stage, which are the purple blocks, and here the methodology is developed for what the research questions are going to be, what the hypotheses are going to be, how the data is going to be collected and potentially analyzed. At the end of the proposal stage, there's a proposal defense. Once the defense is approved, then we go to the actual data collection phase, but first we make a stop at the IRB to get approval there. Then we move on to the orange blocks and begin collecting data, analyzing it, reporting the statistical findings and whether the hypotheses are supported or rejected, and then finally summarize the results and conclusions. At which point a final defense is scheduled, and if completed successfully, you have your dissertation. So that's the process. Today I'm going to be talking about the second stream of literature, how the stream is synthesized with the first stream, and how a gap is defined and a bridge is developed. Some students ask, why do you need two streams of literature? What's wrong with one stream? Well, at least two streams are necessary because you're going to draw them together and synthesize them into something new. The reason that we want to use existing theory and draw from the literature is because that's already been proven to be accepted as valid to the extent things can be accepted as valid. So you're not trying to invent something totally new. It's like, use the analogy of a chef, master chef in the kitchen. The chef doesn't have to go out and grow wheat and doesn't have to slaughter cows and raise chickens. Okay, he's got ingredients in his pantry. He knows what he has. His job is to come up using the existing ingredients and come up with a new dish, a superb new dish that everybody will acclaim as being better than anything that's existed before out of those particular ingredients. That's what combining these streams of literature into a gap and a dissertation, which is essentially the finished dish. The reason it's important is because a synthesis that combines two existing streams will provide value to both of those streams. You'll be adding to the existing literature. Consequently, people will be able to review the dissertation work and potential articles that are generated out of the dissertation as pushing the field forward, adding another eighth of an inch to our understanding of how the theories and the data within that field operate. So essentially, we'll be taking one stream, combining it with a second stream, synthesizing them together, and coming up with a new idea. So, how about an example? I'll be showing several examples. This is the first one. This comes from our general management class, our DBA 710, and an article that's used in that class called From General Systems Theory to Total Quality Management. The abstract demonstrates or explains the two bodies of literature that are going to be worked with. You're going to work with total quality management theory and general systems theory. They are going to be contrasted side by side, and the author is going to attempt to link these two together. How do they do that? Well, you start with your foundational literature from general systems theory and organizational studies. Okay, that's where you start, and then you develop that through your stream of literature to get more modern and more modern with what the current thinking is in general systems theory and also living systems theory is. And then you have your second stream of literature, which is the TQM literature. And here it comes from Deming's work and Dean and Bowen's work, and that forms the basis of the second stream of literature. So these are going to be running kind of in parallel, developed, refined down, integrated with all the literature that's been provided that's relevant to this particular topic, till we finally come up with a gap. And here the gap is the relationship between these two theories, the TQM theory or model and the general systems theory. So what the authors have done here is they provided a side-by-side comparison on the basis of the assumptions, the organizational goal, the organizational purpose, the systems model, the management functions, and the system boundaries, and then side by side they've matched them up. Okay, so now they've defined there is a gap between these two, but we've found the basic criteria by which we're going to compare them. Now, to bridge the gap, the author says, overall, TQM is about as learning-oriented as is possible for a management program to be. Although the TQM doesn't implicitly provide for double-loop learning, it does adopt most learning principles. There's authorities quoted, referenced, journal articles that support that literature. And they've called the TQM second-order learning as TQL, total quality learning. However, TQL is not as prescriptive as other TQM practices. And the table shown below summarizes the three system principles. So what you'll see here, again, this is the bridge, is we have the three main aspects of general systems theory, cybernetics and feedback, process and change and learning. And here we have the three characteristics of TQM, customer focus, continuous improvement, and teamwork. And what the author has done is shown for each one of these cross-sections in this grid that there are specific things that link them together. For example, customer focus and cybernetics link with customers and suppliers, focus on information collection. And those are qualities for both theories, for both the TQM and the general systems theory. Okay, so they've bridged the gap and shown that these two theories coming from different aspects, different fields, are in fact compatible and can be integrated. So how would this look as a picture of building the two streams up to the gap? Well, for one stream, we're starting with total quality management theory. For the other stream, we're starting with general systems theory. For TQM, we're then going to break it down, start focusing on two subsystems, including the production, the information systems, and the human resources systems. In general systems theory, we're going to refine our stream to higher order human systems. So we're not talking about ecosystems, we're not talking about animals, we're talking about organizations. For TQM now, we refine further into the basic qualities of teamwork, customer focus, and continuous improvement. For the higher order human systems, from general systems theory, we have cybernetics and feedback, learning, process, and change. Okay? So now we've defined our literature streams. We've said that there's a gap that we think we can bridge, and the bridge is this summarized in this little grid that shows how the main focus of general systems theory and the main focus of TQM focus on the same issues, the same criterion. Okay, so that's the way it's done. Let's look at another example, this one from strategic management. This is from an article called A Social Learning Approach to Strategic Management Toward a Theoretical Foundation. This was published in the Academy of Management Review 1982. The abstract in this case tells us pretty much what the author is planning on doing. It talks about the two various theoretical bases. So general systems theory, or general theory of strategic management would be useful, they're saying, to enhance research, teaching, and application. This paper is going to present a social learning theory of strategic management that encompasses earlier attempts to explain strategic management, offers a distinctive conceptual framework. Okay, so here in the abstract, they've already said we're going to be using strategic management literature as one body. We're going to be using social learning theory as our other body of literature, and we're then going to build them up and build a bridge across them. Well, now that they've presented their topic, now we have to build the streams of literature. And the first stream is going to come out of strategic management, and so we're going to go back to the foundational literature of the time. There's some names there that might be familiar: Ackoff and Andrews, Ansoff, Boston Consulting Group, Chandler, and others. And you'll notice that Porter and Barney aren't included in this list, and that's because this article was published before they had published their articles. But they did have a solid base of literature at the time, considered strategic management literature. So this is where they begin, with the foundational literature in strategic management. So then we're going to deal with refining that literature and leading up to a point where we can say there's a reason why adding learning theory to social learning theory to strategic management theory would make sense. And we'll summarize it here with Mintzberg saying that researchers in management have gravitated away from policy making towards more tangible areas, where theory building is less demanding, less risky, and immediately rewarding. Okay, so there's a reason that this paper needs to be written. That's the first leg. That's the body of literature from strategic management at the time. Now we're going to be looking at social learning and the foundational literature there, which is attributed primarily to Bandura, who kind of invented the term. There was earlier work that led to it, of course, but here they're starting with the foundational literature in the 1960s, and then subsequent literature that came after that to define what social learning is all about. Now, they're getting closer to defining the gap by saying, although some evolution in strategic management is evident, the field remains loosely knit, and a congruent theory of strategic management has yet to be provided. The intent of this paper is to present a theory that will permit existing strategy concepts to be synthesized in a truly integrated framework. Okay, so they're defining the gap where they're going to be going. So we've got the gap. How are we going to build the bridge? Well, the first step is planning. So we have to lay out our basic foundations of both supports. So social learning theory, okay, starts out with a basic social learning model and a model of strategic management. They're consisting of three primary components and their relationships. components are not new to strategic management, but the context that they're presented offers a useful conceptual framework. Okay, let's see what they're talking about here. So they're saying that social learning has this particular framework, which includes the ongoing relationship interactive between a person, behavior, and the organization, and the environment. They're saying that if we expand this now into the realm of strategic management and use the same triangular diagram, we now can look at the same social learning process from the perspective of strategic management, where we have behaviors, we have the organization, the individual that makes strategic decisions, and we have the environment. So there's a consistency. But that's a little bit rough. We still need a more refined, detailed blueprint to build the bridge. So here we have it, taking it to the next step, where they're now providing a strategic management system with a organizational learning perspective, which includes stimulus situations, which come from the internal and external environment, the organism itself, which comes from strategic management's goals, behaviors, attitudes, cognitive system, then behaviors, which would be analysis, strategy development, organizational policy, and so on, and finally the consequences, which then are termed as strategic planning and strategic implementation. And of course the consequences will be interpreted again by the environment, so they'll become part of the external environment, the internal environment. Through a feedback loop, the organization will learn from that and alter their behaviors and provide new behaviors and consequences. Okay, so this integrates or synthesizes both the social learning process along with strategic management theory. But beyond that, we still need to construct the bridge. We've got the blueprint now. We've got to use now the steel and cement to put it together. So now the article goes into explaining what the environment is and supplies the literature about environment. It goes into what the organism is, and here we'd be talking about an organization, not a plant or a microscopic animal. Then we have the strategic behaviors, interaction between management and the environmental variables, and finally the consequences. So we've now built the bridge, we've got all the supporting literature, we've got the basic ideas all laid out, and we're ready to cut the ribbon. So here the conclusion says this paper is presented at Social Learning Theory of Strategic Management in an attempt to provide a theoretical framework encompassing already existing management approaches and techniques and offering a fresh perspective on the reciprocal relationship of important strategic variables. As such, it incorporates systems and contingency theory perspectives, provides a framework for research and analysis, is applicable to a variety of organizational types, and provides a mechanism for translating theory into practice. So, done and done. So that's an example from strategic management. How did they build the bridge? Well, we started from strategic management as one body of literature. Organizational behavior is another body of literature. We took the streams of literature from that, so we're going to be working only with social learning theory and integrated theory of strategic management as bodies of literature and developing the streams. Here, strategic management looks at the descriptive and normative models, while social learning theory looks at the environment, organisms, behaviors, and consequences. Bringing them together, we start building the bridge, which is the schematic, demonstrated in the schematic and more supported with the later descriptive text about how these things tie together. And the net result is called the social learning theory of strategic management. Okay, one last example. This one will be taken from Leadership. Here we're looking at a paper called Social and Motivational Antecedents of Perceptions of Transformational Leadership, a Self-Determination Theory Perspective. The abstract again gives us an idea about what's going to be used as the bodies of literature. The two streams are going to come from self-determination theory and transformational leadership theory. Okay, so that gives us our starting point. And what the gap is going to be is whether self-determination theory helps explain perceptions of transformational leadership. Self-determination theory, SDT, is measured by autonomous motivation, meaning that a person, a leader, feels like they can work without being told to do something, and perceived competence, obviously meaning they're good at what they do. The theory being that people who have these characteristics are more likely to be effective leaders. The study is going to try to find out whether higher levels of autonomous motivation and perceived competence will lead to being people perceiving themselves as being transformational leaders. So the bridge and the gap and the bodies of literature lead to the hypotheses, where they say managers' autonomous motivation is positively related to their transformational leadership perceptions. So I explained what they're saying is leaders or managers who feel like they are motivated to act without any leadership being placed on them, they will tend to feel that they act in a more transformational leadership style. And then secondly, the manager's self-efficacy, meaning their self-confidence in what they do, their evaluation of their competency, is also positively related to their transformational leadership perceptions, meaning if they feel confident in what they do and competent, they're more likely to see themselves as transformational leaders. These are going to be measured, these variables are going to be measured by different instruments that have been verified. So autonomous motivation is going to be measured by the intrinsic motivation in identified regulation subscales, or the work role motivation scale for school principals. And self-efficacy is going to be measured on the 12-item school principal self-efficacy scale. Okay, so those are going to be the independent variables. And the dependent variable in this case, and which is a little bit unusual, normally transformational leadership is the independent variable, and then we see how it affects other things. But in this case, we're kind of working it in an opposite way again, which makes this study a little bit different and unique from other studies. And transformational leadership is going to be measured by a 12-item self-reported transformational leadership scale based upon the multi-factor leadership questionnaire and the transformational leadership questionnaire. So those are going to be our variables, and then, of course, the results of those questionnaires are going to be analyzed through a statistical method, and we're going to see whether these hypotheses are accepted or rejected. So in this case, as I said, it's a little bit different because autonomous motivation and self-efficacy are going to be used as the independent variables to measure their effect on perceived transformational leadership. So in summary, what we're doing here is pointing out how the two-stream and gap and bridge method is used in constructing academic research. Not all peer-reviewed journal articles are based on this particular method. However, we are using this particular approach for dissertations because it provides a level of rigor and it contributes to the existing bodies of literature. And it is kind of a proven, accepted method. If you can do this, you've got a valid dissertation. As you're reading the articles, look for those articles which have gaps and bridges. It'll make you more adept and proficient at thinking of your own. And then, as you can see, by using the research articles as examples, that the importance of defining things clearly and having strong supporting literature is absolutely essential to creating your streams of literature and to be able to precisely define what the gap is and then building the bridge. So, until next time, get in touch with me if you have any questions, and goodbye and good luck.